Welcome back to the Making the Madness YouTube channel. It's Sean back again with another video discussing a commitment here. I guess two commitments in this case. The Providence Friars making another splash in the transfer portal. Ed Cooley's done such a good job over the last couple of years really building the foundation of the program via the transfer portal. He's gravitated well to just retooling the roster, and that's what they did, and that's what landed them the position they were last year to get a 4 seed in the tournament. A lot of that roster came via the transfer portal outside of Nate Watson. This year, they already added Noah Locke earlier in the week. Jonathan had a video covering that. I can talk briefly about that just because Noah Locke, I think, is a little bit underrated at this point because he had a bad year last year with Louisville. But if you look at his prior 3 years, where he spent 3 seasons on Florida teams that were pretty good, he was a good player. He's a contributor that could shoot the ball really well from outside. He's a smaller two guard, 6'3", but he shot 43% from 3 in 2019-2020, 40% in 2020-2021. He wasn't, like I said, good this year, but I think a lot of that is just the Louisville team in general wasn't good, so I think that put down his stats a little bit. I think he'll be right back around the 40% marker this season, and he'll be a key contributor for Providence. But this video, the main player to talk about here is Devin Carter, a former top 100 recruit at South Carolina. He really had a solid season as a freshman, played around 20 minutes per game, but he really got on my radar during the Asheville Invitational when he had a really good game against Western Kentucky. He showed his athleticism. That was the first time I really watched him. I didn't know a ton about him coming in, but he really impressed behind some veteran guards like Jermaine Couisnard and Eric Stevenson. He had a good season. He has 16 in that game, 8 rebounds and 4 assists against Western Kentucky. He had 22 in a win over Army. He had 20 in a blowout loss against Arkansas. And there's 2 areas that are clear that he has to improve. That's the three-point shooting and that's the foul shooting. Because he's a guy that I expect to get to the foul line a pretty solid amount. I mean, this year alone, he got there almost 4 times per game, and he didn't play a ton. So he will get to the foul line a good amount. He's a great driver, and he's very athletic. So 68%, you'd like to see that in the high 70s probably. If he can get it there, that's a pretty comfortable spot. But his three-point shooting was 16 for 60, 26%. Now, he had some games where he hit some deep threes, which is really impressive, but he missed some pretty decent looks at times, and I think he's the kind of guy that if he can shoot around 33, 34%, 76, 77% from the foul line, with his 45, 44, 46% from the field, I think you're looking at a guy that could average 14-plus points per game, be a plus defender, and be a really good player for Providence because they do lose Al Durham, who wasn't the most efficient player this year, but when it came down to crunch time, clutch moments, you knew Al Durham was stepping up, and he made some key plays when it mattered. I think Devin Carter will probably be a little more efficient. He has a much higher upside because Durham was on his 5th year of eligibility. Carter's only spent 1 season in college on a South Carolina team that didn't make the NIT. So now he's going to be on a team that's much better, and I think that's only going to help him grow as a player. He can play either guard spot. He's a combo. On this team, he's probably playing the 2 most times with Jared Bynum running the point, but that's solid. You'll take him there, and he could play the point at times too. And then the other addition they made today was Clifton Moore, who started his career with Indiana, 2017 recruit. He was in the same recruiting class as Justin Smith, who later transferred to Arkansas, Race Thompson, who's using his 5th year of eligibility to come back to Indiana, and Al Durham. There's a little Providence connection there already. Al Durham and Clifton Moore were in the same recruiting class, and he brings a little bit of a different dimension. He'll probably split time at the 5 with Ed Crosswell, who's more of a bruiser, back to the basket big man like Nate Watson was, not much of a shooter. But Clifton Moore gives you a guy that runs the floor really well. He's athletic, blocked almost 3 shots per game, really had a breakout season for LaSalle. Can shoot the ball from 3. He's not a great shooter, but if you leave him open, he can hit one. I think he'll be a really solid contributor for this Providence team. They need an energy guy like him that can block shots, who can throw down some lobs, who can hit a 3 if you leave him open, gives you a little more flexibility, gives you a little more floor stretching ability. So I like what Clifton Moore should bring to the table. That's another solid transfer addition. And I think Providence, I wouldn't have them ranked in my top 25 right now. I'd probably have them just outside top 30-ish team right now. Maybe they end up being the 3rd best team in the Big East, the 4th best team. I think right now you're kind of looking at Creighton number 1. You have to put Villanova up there even though the roster isn't great because Jay Wright's still there. He's the coach. They're going to be good. Xavier and Providence are probably interchangeable at the 3 or 4 spot. But the one thing I want to see from Providence this season, They lose Justin Minaya, who I think is a guy that could play at the next level with how good his defense is. He's not a complete offensive player. He's an okay offensive player, but most of his value, if not all of his value, comes from the defensive end. I think he could carve out maybe a solid NBA career due to his defense. But he was everything for this team. He wasn't the team's best player, but I think he might have been the team's most important player because he slowed down Ochai Agbaji in the tournament. He slowed down Baylor Shireman. He slowed down other teams' best players, and right now, we don't know who that guy is for Providence. I think if you have a guy, you're not going to replace Justin Minaya with someone of his caliber, but if you could find someone that can step into that role and be a bit of a defensive stopper, I think that goes a long way because they're not in the position they were last year without Justin Minaya. There's some times last year where he single-handedly changed games. It might not show up on the box score, but he changed games with his defensive ability. I think that was a very underrated aspect of what Providence was last season. But this is a solid team. I like the addition of Noah Locke. Falls under the radar because he wasn't good this year, but I think he will be good this season. Double-digit scorer, 40% shooter. I think that'll be what he is at Providence. The real key here is how do you replace Minaya, and what do you get from Clifton Moore and Ed Crosswell? Ed Crosswell was a solid player off the bench behind Nate Watson, but he's pretty much the same player as Nate Watson, a little less athletic, maybe a little more efficient inside, not as versatile with how he can score because Nate Watson had a good hook shot he could go to. I don't think Croswell has as much of that in his game, but I'd like to see the split between two former LaSalle players, by the way, Clifton Moore and Ed Crosswell. So there's connections here everywhere. They were together at LaSalle. They didn't play together, but they were together at LaSalle. Both were there at some point. And Clifton Moore and Al Durham both came into Indiana at the same time. So there's a lot of connections there with Clifton Moore. But I'm curious to see how that minute split will look because that's likely to be what Providence fans will see at the 5. You're seeing a Clifton Moore, you're seeing a Crosswell. I think that's solid. It's not Nate Watson, but it's solid. And I think Devin Carter is the kind of guy that could be an absolute superstar. I think he could be a potential NBA player like his father, Anthony Carter, who's now an assistant for the Miami Heat. Anthony Carter was a really solid NBA player during his day in the 90s and then heading into the 2000s. I think he retired in 2010, 2011. So I think Devin Carter could really live up to that same kind of potential. He could be a pro. He could be an All Big East first team kind of guy. And he could put Providence back in the position to win a couple of NCAA tournament games this season. So like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video talking about the Providence Friars, Devin Carter, Clifton Moore, and a little bit of Noah Locke. We'll have more videos coming. We'll be showing our faces here soon on the videos to improve them a little bit here and try to make the content as good as we can. So like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. We're over 500 subscribers now. Jonathan, myself, definitely appreciate that. All the support over the last couple of weeks and over the years since we've been making these transfer videos. So until next time, have a good one, everybody.